A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you as we've got a two-parter today as one of our good friends in Eli Boettger, who is the founder of the Fine Network, eCheck CBB. He's going to be joining me in segment number 2. A little bit of West Coast love today. We're going to be talking about some of the Mountain West teams that might be a little bit under the radar. How many bids can we legitimately expect from the Mountain West? Is there a team that might be a little bit under the radar outside the Big Four, which I consider to be Colorado State, New Mexico, Boise State, and obviously San Diego State, that might be able to make a run to the NCAA tournament? What can we expect out of those Big Four teams? We're going to be diving in there, and he's going to be mentioning a few teams that he has his eye on, a lot of them from the SEC that could be positively or negatively affected based on what happens with these two-time transfers and whether or not they get waivers, sort of what we're taking a look at there, because we did see Woody Newton get his waiver approved, but we've been seeing a lot of other players, not just in college basketball, as a lot of these college basketball rulings have not come through quite yet, but more in college football get denied as well. So we're going to be taking a look at a lay of the land there with Eli. And if you ever do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And yes, X is also Twitter. So either way, it'll get you to the same place. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I was planning on having a lot of cleanup to do because we did 2 conference previews over the last 2 days. Got you guys the ACC and got you guys also the American Conference, which means that we're down to just 4 conference previews. The Big 12, the Big East, the Pac-12, and the SEC. That's that. We have done all of our conference previews. I'll probably put those out about 1 a week at this point. That'll give us a nice 2-week runway to be able to make any revisions from there and get you guys all set for the upcoming season. So please do send in those questions because we are getting closer and closer, less than 6 weeks away from the start of the college basketball season, but we really didn't see a lot of news and notes. We are starting to get into that quiet period. Teams just returned to practice, so we should be getting some injury updates within the next few days. I know that John Rothstein tweeted out a few of them. Nothing really earth-shattering, like Marcus Omas didn't play with regards to the team's foreign trip. I know that he tweeted out that seems like he should be good to go, but really nothing of concern to this point, but I am certainly staying locked in there, and right now we are awaiting what we're going to be actually getting with regards to these rosters because we don't have too much of an idea what is going to be happening with these two-time transfers, so that's why we bring in Eli to be able to sort things out and to be able to take a look at the lay of the land on that front, take a look at the Mountain West, and so much more as we do so next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Are you ready to become a winning sports bettor? Schedule a call with SBIA to find out how their service can make you a long-term winning player. They've developed an innovative algorithm that maximizes units return, and they are so confident in their system that they offer a money-back guarantee. Sign up by October 31st and get their MBA package at no cost until they reach 10 net units. They treat sports betting like a business. So if you want to learn how to make your sports betting dreams a reality, visit them at SBIA1.com and check them out on social media at SBIA Sports.
And we're back with lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is great to be joined by this man as Eli Boettger. He does amazing work over at eCheck CBB. He is the founder of that great network. He is joining me. I know that he, along with everyone else over there at eCheck CBB, the Field of 68, the 3-man weave, they are fresh off of putting out the Almanac, which that previews all 362 D1 teams. They did absolutely amazing work. I know that Eli played a nice hand in that, especially taking a look at a lot of the teams out here on the West Coast, as he, much like myself, is out here in the Pacific time zone, and you're able to follow him on the old X at his last name, Boettger, Boettger_, and then his first name of Eli. And Eli, it is always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much as always, Greg. It's always a good time to hop on here and talk college basketball, especially with the season just right around the corner, especially now that the Almanac's out. It's time to dive nose first into everything, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I am as well. And Eli, I just alluded to it. You put in some great work with regards to the Almanac. And I know that a lot of your focus was a little bit more on the West Coast. I know that you're always a man that is a little bit all over the place. You cover all things college basketball and do a great job of it. But with regards to everything that you did take a look at for the Almanac, was there maybe a team, maybe a player, a few teams, a few players that you dove in on, and maybe they weren't necessarily someone or a team that you were thinking highly of to start with, but as you were researching, as you were talking to the coaches, you just felt a little bit better about in general?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that our opinions can change pretty drastically throughout the course of an offseason, especially nowadays when just these rosters can be so fluid from April all the way up until the first day of the season. But there's one team in particular, I don't know if I'm necessarily more bullish on, but I'm just really intrigued to see play, and that's Utah State. And I was really fascinated with Danny Sprinkle taking over this job from Montana State, and he did a really great job over there in the Big Sky, and led Montana State to a couple of NCAA tournament appearances and established just a hard-nosed and nitty-gritty brand of basketball that was just so tough to compete against, especially in a win-or-go-home scenario. I think that's why Montana State was so effective these last couple of years in the Big Sky tournament. But it's a unique situation for Danny Sprinkle because he's taking over a brand-new roster. There are 0 scholarship players who recorded a point last year who are returning to this year's roster. It's basically a fresh set of faces, and it's a talented team. I like the roster. There are 2 guys who are holdovers from Montana State. That's Darius Brown at point guard and Great Osabor, who's more of like a small ball 5, but also plays quite a bit of 4 and is a really good bully ball type player, maybe kind of like a David Roddy, if you can even make that comparison. But those 2 are going to be the table setters and the experienced players on this team because they are familiar with Danny Sprinkle's system. But it's a really intriguing group of wings and 2 guards. Ian Martinez makes the trip over from Maryland. He's got Big Ten experience. I'm also keeping an eye on guys like Josh Udeji from Coastal Carolina, Max Ogbonkpolo, who has Pac-12 experience and is transferring in the same conference from Wyoming. He's a really lanky type of wing who is developing still his offensive game, but is probably the best defender on the team. And Javon Jackson, who's a really talented JUCO transfer as well in the backcourt. So it's asking a lot to mesh an entirely new team together with a new coaching staff. I mean, everything's going to be brand new, but I still think Utah State has the pieces in place, assuming everything comes together to be a 20-win team and potentially a roster that competes for an at-large berth. I don't think they're quite on the same echelon as, say, San Diego State or Colorado State or Boise State, but I still think there's a lot here and far from an empty cupboard for Danny Sprinkle in his first year if everything can get rolling. And it's a big if, of course, and we haven't really seen a coach try to take on an entirely new roster at the power conference type level, but there's a lot to like here about Utah State.
Yep, and Danny Sprinkle, we saw him do some tremendous work over at Montana State, and I certainly do expect him to be able to do some solid work with Utah State as well, a team that I'm feeling a little bit more bullish about as well, as Eli Boettger does amazing work over at HXCBB is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how do you view really, I'm going to call it the top 4 of the conference, because I do think that there's a case, once again, that we could see 4 teams be able to make the NCAA tournament. Maybe I'm giving a little bit of short shrift to UNLV, but we've seen some big hype from them in the past. I do need to see it to believe it before I can really put them in that echelon. But Colorado State is a bunch that they bring back Isaiah Stevens, who I think is one of the best guards in all of college basketball. Forget mid-major, major, what have you. He's just one of the best guards in all of college basketball. Boise State and all that they bring back with Tyson Dagenhart and company. Obviously, San Diego State made the national title game last year. It would be a shock if they don't make the NCAA tournament. And then New Mexico with their 2 big guards as well. I look at all 4 of these teams, and I do think that it is very realistic that we could see the Mountain West once again get a bunch of teams into the NCAA tournament. And now they were able to get the monkey off their back with San Diego State making that massive run last year to really bolster the conference.
It's going to be an intriguing year for the Mountain West, especially after the momentum from this past year with San Diego State really kicking the doors down and making a sustained run in the NCAA tournament. And gosh, the expectation for so long was for just one team to even make the second weekend, but for San Diego State to really be one lengthy scoring run away from winning the national title, it's still crazy to think about that in hindsight. San Diego State's going to be a fascinating team this year and bringing most of the pieces back. Obviously, the loss of Matt Bradley is going to be significant, and Keishad Johnson, although he's not really a major stats guy, he was an impactful player. And of course, Nathan Mensah down low is probably one of the best bigs in terms of defending in all of college basketball. But it's an opportunity for these up-and-comers to make a difference. I think Jaden Ledee can take on a bigger role. He was really pivotal in San Diego State's NCAA tournament run. Jay Powell, who's transferring over as well, he's going to be a fascinating player. Campbell transfer, who's got quite a bit of length, and he's going to be able to defend at a high level and is surprisingly the highest returning scorer of any of these players from this prior season. So that will be something to monitor. And I know there's going to be a lot of inflated value for Lamont Butler given the game-winning shot that he hit in the national semifinal, but he just seems like he is primed to explode this season. And he made a nice stride, especially on the offensive end. As a junior last season, he was always kind of a defensive first type of player, but it seems like he's really finding his jump shot, and that should bode well for this upcoming season in the backcourt along with Darion Trammell. So there's a lot to like about San Diego State. There are some intriguing pieces. Reese Waters makes the trip over from the Pac-12 as the Pac-12 Sixth Man of the Year. Micah Parrish is still on campus, and they also have all of these now year two guys who were part of a top 60, top 70 freshman class from a season ago, and none of them really played, so it's kind of a wait-and-see mode for them. I don't know if they'll necessarily be as good as they were last year, and expecting a Final Four run is next to impossible no matter which team in the country it is, but I'd say they are pretty firm, unanimous number one pick. And then from there, Greg, it feels pretty wide open. I think you could probably make the case for 4 teams into that number 2 slot. I'd go with Boise State at number 2. They've got a nice set of returning players on that roster. And I think finding a point guard to replace Marcus Shaver really helps. Roddy Anderson's transferring over, who should be an impactful player. And then Colorado State and New Mexico, they both return a lot of the guys who have done quite a bit with their programs. It's going to be really, really fun to watch Jalen House again, Isaiah Stevens again, a lot of these guys who have done so much in the Mountain West Conference. And then it almost feels like we're kind of forgetting about Nevada, which has a pretty solid roster after making the NCAA tournament last year. Keenan Blackshear's back, Jared Lucas is back. Trey Coleman could be in that wait-and-see mode as far as a breakout player, and KJ Himes, same deal kind of with him as well. UNLV, they've got the talent. It's kind of a matter of when that talent will lead into victories, and losing a 20-point scorer on Elijah Harkless certainly does not help, but there is a lot on that roster, and maybe this is finally the year, and we've been waiting for quite a long time for UNLV to really show that it can be a 20-plus win program. It's going to be a tall hill to climb because of all the teams I just mentioned, but they have a roster that could reasonably compete with a lot of other teams in this conference as far as talent is concerned.
Yeah, Ben, we saw Nevada be able to take a nice step up last year as well, so there is a lot of intrigue with regards to Mountain West, and with the Mountain West, there are a few teams that are going to be reliant upon transfers, and something that is buzzing around college basketball right now. And I do think that there might be a few teams in the Mountain West a little bit affected by this, but I don't think that there's overly many. And that's the fact that 2-time transfers, we've been seeing it a lot in college football, and it's lingered into college basketball. A lot of them are not getting waivers. We have seen a little bit of good news as Woody Newton, who's a 2-time transfer, heading on over to George Mason last week, was able to get a waiver. So perhaps that'll be something that shifts the tide with this regard. But how are you gauging this situation? Because the way that I've been taking a look at things both in college basketball and in college football is that until otherwise noted, if a guy is a 2-time transfer, not a graduate, I do have to assume them to be out of the fold. And I think that this is going to have an effect on quite a few teams as we project forward.
It's going to be massive, and something that, at least for me, has always kind of felt like just a roulette wheel. You never really know what you're going to get as far as the NCAA's waiver process is concerned. We've seen players who we expect to get waivers who get denied. We've seen vice versa, and you never really know. It's kind of an interesting situation that may have a big impact on a lot of these teams, and especially nowadays, and especially with this year, as far as the record-breaking transfer numbers and coaches really relying on the idea that these players will get approved and will be ready to play. And if it's not for the case of a medical waiver, which those can also be kind of up in the air, it really is in the NCAA's hands as far as whether these players are going to be able to take the court in November. It can be massive. And a lot of the guys who we will report on and talk most about are starters, but depth is massive too, especially as these coaches are trying to figure out their rotations in November and December. If you lose your seventh best player or eighth best player, you're expected to get 10, 15, sometimes even 20 minutes a night out of that guy. And if he's not available, it's time to reassess and figure out some different options from there, especially when you're trying to, like I touched on with Utah State, trying to make so many new pieces come together and create one cohesive unit. It is such a challenge, and we're going to see a number of waivers that either get approved or denied, and that's going to be massive over these next handful of weeks as we get ready to preview the season. And I mean, it's something that we talked about quite a bit in the Almanac behind the scenes of how are we going to handle this? How are we going to project teams? There's quite a bit of healthy debate around whether or not we just assume two-time transfers are going to get denied. And there's also kind of the optimistic lens of it's wait and see mode and see whether these guys get accepted. So all that to say, it really is up in the air. I think for now, it's probably the safe assumption that players who have transferred multiple times are going to get denied, and some may be more successful than others. And we honestly don't really know the reason why. It's just kind of up in the hands of the NCAA, and we'll see what happens from there. But I think for now, it's probably a safe assumption that a lot of these players will not be able to see the court in November and for the foreseeable future.
Yep, I am in agreement with you there. I do think that until otherwise noted, we do need to be taking a look at it. And unfortunately, thinking that these 2+ time transfers that aren't graduate transfers are probably going to be out of the fold. But you just never know with the NCAA. As shown to me on the show, we do have Eli Boettger, who does amazing work over at eCheck CBB. And are there a few teams in particular that you do take a look at that this might affect the most? Because I think the obvious one is Ole Miss with what Chris Beard has coming into the fold. It felt like he was banking on the NCAA, thinking, these guys are all going to be able to hit the floor, and it does not seem like that is going to be the case. But I also think that Memphis, not even so much with the two-time transfers, but also with DeAndre Williams, that interesting situation, because if he's out there on the court, I just did my American Conference preview on the show yesterday, that is a big difference maker for a Memphis team that is very much overhauled. But are there any other teams that do come to mind that maybe are a little bit more off the beaten path that you're thinking, man, if they don't get these transfers out there on the floor, it might be a little bit of doomsday for them?
That's an interesting question. I think it's probably wise to turn our attention to the SEC, because there are a lot of these rosters in the SEC that are heavily built around transfers this upcoming season. The first one that comes to mind is LSU. They have a number of players who could be impactful this season who may or may not be ready to go at the start of the season. LSU is one. Florida, I know, has a number of transfers who are making their way over to Gainesville. Arkansas is probably another team as well. And you touched on Ole Miss, and that was going to be one of the teams that I was going to highlight as well. A lot of these SEC teams, it could be a fascinating month or so for these rosters and waiting to hear who's going to be ready to go or not, whether it's medical related or whether it's just a two-time transfer waiver approval or just a one-time transfer. There's so much up in the air, but I do think if we're looking at one conference in particular, it's probably the SEC that's going to get the most attention in terms of highly impactful players who will wait and see whether or not they'll be accepted. But you mentioned Memphis. I think Memphis is another team that's in a similar boat as far as some of the players that they've had who have already transferred multiple times. And I think St. John's as well with Rick Pitino. There are a lot of players who are coming over from different places, some of which who have transferred multiple times. I'd be curious what happens with the Johnnies and if all these guys are ready to go, because it can swing a lot. If St. John's roster is at full strength, I think this is a pretty intriguing team that could do some damage. If not, I mean, Rick Pitino kind of has an uphill battle for his first year with the Johnnies, so that'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yep, I am in agreement with you there on St. John's. They already got a good break with Dennis Jenkins being ruled a graduate transfer, so he is going to be able to hit the floor right away, because if they did not have him out there, that would be relatively rough to say the least. But there are a lot of teams that we're going to be needing to gauge moving forward. And Eli, I know that you and everyone else over there at eCheck CBB are hard at work doing that and so much more. You guys did absolutely impeccable work with regards to the Almanac. I made sure to be smart. I got the pre-order, so I was able to get a few dollars off, and I think that was one of the more wise investments that I made, and it's always wise to be able to get you aboard. So love the good people at home. Know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
I really appreciate the kind words. As always, Greg, you can check out the Almanac at cbbalmanac.com. We'll be continuing to promote that over the coming weeks as we get ready for the season, and a lot of awesome quotes from the coaches who we spoke to and have different things to say. There's so many unique personalities in this sport and so many unique destinations and rosters that it takes a lot of effort to cover it all, but we're happy with the product with the Almanac, so be sure to check out and gain your access to that if you haven't already. And now that the Almanac is out, we're able to also turn quite a bit of attention over to heatcheckcbb.com, where we'll have all of our content, new podcasts loaded over there very soon. So we're excited to really get into the thick of things as we're a handful of weeks out from the start of the new season. So we're excited to get rolling.
And Eli does such a great job all 12 months out of the year taking a look at this game that we all know and love. He and everyone else over there at HXCBB did an incredible job on the Almanac. And if you have yet to pick it up, I encourage you all to do so, as $20 are very well spent there. As a big thanks to Eli Boettger for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my old X timeline at GNN_41. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'll be with you guys every single day on this podcast. We're down to just 4 conference previews now. The Big 12, the Big East, along with the Pac-12 and the SEC. I'm probably going to do about 1 a week moving forward, so that'll leave us about 14 days where all the conference previews are done. I'm able to dive in on all these questions that you might have, and we're going to have a successful season. Once we get in season, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. Always appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm with you guys every single day, and that means I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.